Hello again, fight fans. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. Brand new issue has hit the presses. Be sure to check it out. You're watching The Neutral Corner for the week of February 6th. Okay, real quick before I get started, I want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to Raging Babe. Guys, be sure to check out ragingbabe.com. Just want to say thank you for this shirt. Some of my favorite fighters of all time. Maybe I'm a tad biased, but I love this shirt. I just want to thank you guys over at Raging Babe very much. But getting back to the boxing, look, 2016, the schedule so far is very, very bleak. I showed you guys a new issue of Boxing Monthly with a feature of the upcoming Frampton-Quigg fight. This is one of the few fights so far this year that I'm excited about. The schedule is very bleak, but there's a lot of news to talk about. So I wanted to take some time in this episode to talk about some of the PBC troubles. It is not looking good over there at Premier Boxing Champions. I want to talk also about some upcoming fights that were announced recently. You guys probably heard that Canelo is going to fight Amir Khan at a catchweight, big surprise, of 155 pounds. We'll talk about that and some other things. Of course, we'll do the review preview, including Sergey Kovalev's destruction of Jean Pascal. But first, let's get started with some of this PBC stuff. Let's update you guys on Premier Boxing Champions. So earlier this week, my friend and colleague Steve Kim wrote a very interesting piece for UCN Live. I'm looking at it right now. And you guys check it out. Go over to UCN Live and check out this article that Steve Kim wrote just about some of the troubles surrounding the PBC right now. And it all started kind of with a Reddit post. There was a guy who's, one of these finance guys who's been following the PBC's financials. We don't really have books. It's not like the PBC's opened up their books and said, hey, everyone, check this out. But you can do estimations based on the little information that's been leaked out. And all the numbers are going to come out in the coming months with the lawsuits that they have pending right now with Top Rank and Golden Boy. They're going through a process in the courts where everything is going to kind of come out, right? It's going to happen, but for right now, we can only estimate. But we do know that the overall upfront investment from Waddell & Reed, that's the investment advisor firm that Al Heyman used to find investors to put up money for the PBC. They came up with $528 million. That was the initial investment, which is huge, really huge, and probably more than enough money, probably more than they needed to do what they wanted to do. Remember, this thing was supposed to go through 2017, okay? According to this Reddit post here, through September 30th last year, they were down to $214 million. And by year end 2015, they were down to $82 million, which means they had lost 84% of that initial investment already. And so the question is, look, whether you believe those numbers, maybe they're a little exaggerated, I don't know for sure, but let's say it's a little bit inflated and the PBC, they've only gone through 50% of their money. I think we can safely say it's well past that, but let's just stick with 50%. Let's be conservative here, okay? You've gone through half of your money. And remember, this was supposed to be an almost 3-year endeavor, and you have to remember that the PBC didn't start until March of 2015. It hasn't even been a full calendar year yet. So if you've gone through possibly 3/4 of your money and you haven't even completed 1 year, that's not looking good. And if you don't believe the numbers, just take a look at some of the other things taking place, okay? Let's just start with the schedule. I'm looking at the PBC site right now. There are only 3 fights scheduled this year right now. There was a few fights in January, but they have 2 small fights, 2 small cards in February on Fox Sports 1, and then there's the March 12th date, Thurman versus Porter. But here's the thing about Thurman versus Porter. That's kind of a split network thing with CBS and Showtime. They're calling it Showtime Boxing on CBS. And Steve Kim, he alluded to this in his article. Showtime is paying a license fee for that fight, okay? So it's really a Showtime broadcast that they're putting a portion of it for free, quote unquote, on CBS. But this is not your traditional PBC time buy. And we've seen in recent months more of these fights going over to Showtime, where you get a license fee if you're Al Haymon and the PBC folks. They don't advertise them as PBC fights, right? But they're PBC fighters. They're Al Haymon fighters. And just to give you guys some numbers here, I pulled up the schedule for last year. In 2015, now remember, this was not a full year because it started in March of 2015. There were 46 bouts, PBC bouts. There were only 9 Showtime Championship boxing cards. 4 of those 9 were in the 4th quarter. So you started to see a trend toward the end of last year where more of the cards are being shifted to Showtime. And you're seeing less cards on quote unquote free television. And you know, I mentioned the fights that are scheduled right now. Let's look at ESPN. ESPN, remember when they first put the deal together, PBC ended Friday Night Fights series and took over. And part of the deal was they were going to do kind of a Friday Night Fights thing, but better because it was going to be on Saturday night. And every month they were going to have a Saturday night card on regular ESPN, not ESPN2. So it was going to be bigger and better than Friday Night Fights ever was. There's nothing scheduled for ESPN. When was the last ESPN PBC card? We haven't been getting those monthly. You look at the other networks like NBC and some of the other networks we've seen PBC fights on, like Fox. There's nothing else scheduled on Fox right now. So you have all these time buys on all these networks, nothing scheduled. Last year, we had fights almost every week, several weeks. We had several PBC cards within a week, right? Not happening right now. So if they're not scheduling fights, that's a giant red flag. A couple things you guys might not realize, and I didn't even know about some of this stuff until I heard it from Steve, but the PBC staff, they were flying around the country in private jets going to these events, okay? They weren't taking a bus, they weren't flying coach, they were flying in private jets to these events. There were drivers at each event, people that would literally drive the media folks around from one place to another during media week. They were not only paying these drivers for that service, but they were putting them up in hotels. Recently, you know, they've stopped putting these guys up in hotels. They're starting to kind of cut corners in terms of cost at the PBC. And that, again, is a giant red flag. So if you're running out of money, you're starting to go over to Showtime where you get that license fee, you're starting to cut costs with your promotion. Man, it just doesn't look good. And you look at the almost 200 fighters Al Haymon has. It's not that he doesn't have fighters. It's that there's no money. And obviously they're caught up in some of the litigation and stuff that they got going on. But man, just giant red flags. But talking about the overall schedule in 2016, you know, overall, I was just looking today, and we've got the Frampton Quigg fight, which I mentioned, that's in this issue of Boxing Monthly. But Leo Santa Cruz is fighting Kiko Martinez on the same date. That's part of that whole card. Terrence Crawford is fighting Hank Lundy on February 27th as well. That's on HBO, obviously. And then HBO is another card on March 5th where Luis King Kong Ortiz, one of the hottest fighters out there right now among hardcore fight fans, he's fighting Alexander Dimitrenko, who isn't a top 10 opponent, but better than some of the guys Ortiz has fought recently. It'll be interesting to see him against a tall, strong heavyweight. Also, Sadim Ali is fighting Jesse Vargas on that card. And over on the other side of the pond, way far on the other side of the pond, Ruslan Shagayev is putting his WBA regular title on the line against Lucas Brown. Then there's the PBC card I mentioned with Thurman and Porter. That's March 12th. Pacquiao Bradley 3 is April 9th. A pretty good undercard, but it's a pay-per-view, and I don't know if fans are going to respond to that. Both Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker are facing TBA in April. Gennady Golovkin has an opponent for his April 23rd date. It is his IBF mandatory Dominic Wade, a fighter who is 18-0 with 12 knockouts. Al Haymon managed fighter. Interesting. You know, it's a guy that most people didn't want to see Golovkin against, but nobody wants to fight the guy. Nonito Donaire fights in April, but he's against TBA as well. And then it was just announced that Canelo Alvarez will be fighting Amir Khan for a 155-pound title on May 7th. That's pretty much the schedule right now through the first half of the year, and it's not very exciting. It's just we're not seeing the matchups that we hoped we would see. And you know, for me, I wonder if part of this is just kind of a hangover that the boxing business has from some of the big matchups we got last year. Cotto Canelo was a fight that fans have been looking forward to for the last year or so. So when that finally came together, and that was a joint promotion, right? That took a lot to make happen. But of course, I'm referring to Mayweather-Pacquiao. And look, I hate going back to that fight over and over and beating up on that fight, but I just think that it was such a collective effort from so many different entities. And not just from the promotional side, the managerial side, the fighters themselves, their camps, the networks, the sports media as a whole. I just think it was just this huge conglomeration, and there's just still a hangover from that. And what I hope is the second half of 2016 will get some payoff. Sergey Kovalev, who I'll talk about more a little bit later, you know, the fight with Adonis Stevenson fell through. Go figure. Adonis Stevenson and his team, I'll talk more about them and his antics jumping up in the ring after Kovalev beat Pascal. But that fight fell through. But Kovalev's still going to fight in June. It's probably going to be in Russia. It's probably going to be against an opponent nobody really cares about. Hopefully at the end of the year, we finally get to see Sergey Kovalev and Andre Ward. But look, in recent interviews, Andre Ward has not seemed to be very excited about that fight. He just kind of won't go all in talking about the fight and promoting it the way Kovalev is. It just gives fans the feeling that Ward's gonna pull out or find a way to delay it, possibly to next year, maybe get injured again. I don't know, man, but it's hard not to be, you know, a pessimist when you think about Andre Ward because of the way he's been a giant cock tease to fight fans in the last few years. But, you know, Canelo fighting Amir Khan, I actually think that this fight is a little more competitive than people think. On paper, you're thinking, man, this is the guy who got drilled by Danny Garcia, right? Who doesn't hit anywhere near as hard as Canelo Alvarez, at least at 155 pounds. But Khan is taller than Canelo. He has longer arms than Canelo. I think that Canelo's power is overrated. I think his size is overrated. The myth that Canelo's this big, strong, strapping middleweight was created by Floyd Mayweather when he signed up to fight him. He made Canelo out to be this giant, monstrous beast of a middleweight, right? This light heavyweight who shrinks down to fight as a junior middleweight. Now he's some catchweight middleweight. He is a big guy. He's stocky, but he's got short arms. He's not very tall. And I think Khan's length, his height, his speed advantage, his footwork advantage, I think those things will give him some tools to work with early on. And I could actually see him boxing and spinning Canelo kind of the way he did to Marcos Maidana. Not that Marcos Maidana and Canelo fight very, very similar, but body size and actually the way their feet move is kind of similar. So I think Khan can have success early. The difference between Alvarez and Maidana is Alvarez is faster, he moves his head better, he throws punches straighter, he's much more fundamentally sound, and he has underrated defensive skills. So I think Canelo eventually is going to chop down Amir Khan. For Canelo, if he doesn't get a knockout here, and I mean a big, big knockout, this is a moral loss from him, and I think he'll get a lot of heat from boxing fans that are getting sick of this 155-pound bullshit. Considering all this, guys, I've completely lost my hope that Canelo-Golovkin is going to happen this year. You know, I've been saying it all along. I don't think it's going to happen until 2017. And this fight against Amir Khan just makes me believe that even more. This matchup doesn't help prepare Canelo for Golovkin at all. Khan doesn't fight anything like Golovkin. It's not at all Like, you take an SAT prep class in high school to prepare for your SATs, right? Well, this ain't no damn SAT prep course. He doesn't want to take that test later this year. I just don't see that fight happening until 2017. I'm trying not to be a pessimist. I'm trying to hope that 2016 will come up with some great matchups, but man, it's looking bleak. I guess, that's it for the PBC stuff and for the week schedule. Let me know what you guys think about this. Comment below. Let's get the conversation started. But for now, let's get into the fight review of last week's action. So last Friday here in Los Angeles at the Belasco Theater, it was another LA Fight Club card where 6 undefeated prospects, 5 of whom are from right here in the greater Los Angeles area, from Southern California, all kept their undefeated records intact, scoring wins, most of them by knockouts. Like I always say, these are fun cards, man. Golden Boy Promotions really does a great job with these cards. They're really, really building a fan base with these new fighters coming up here in Los Angeles. It's basically what K2 has done with Golovkin. Golden Boy's doing that locally here in LA with these fighters, and they're gonna have, there's gonna be future stars that are being built on these cards. But Julian Ramirez is the most notable of the fighters that won. He keeps his undefeated record intact, improves to 16-0. Then Saturday, Kovalev scores a 7th round retirement over Jean Pascal, and this was just a one-sided beatdown. The 3 judges had it 70-62. Those were the scores at the time of the stoppage. Pascal, actually trainer Freddie Roach, threw in the towel, and there's a lot of tweets going back and forth for the last 3 rounds or so before that fight was stopped. The fans just saying, hey man, stop the damn fight. There's no reason for this thing to continue. Sergey Kovalev was just being surgical with the jab, and he wasn't making some of the mistakes he made in the first fight. I love that John David Jackson had to have sat down with Sergey and said, look man, let's watch this tape. Here's what you did wrong here. You ate too much leather. There's no need to eat leather like that. In a fight like this, sit back, take your time, set up the shots. And that's what Sergey did. He found the spots where he could. He took whatever Pascal gave him, which wasn't much in certain spots because Pascal was very defensive, except for those little bursts he fights with, right? And I thought Kovalev, he mentioned after the fight that he was kind of punishing Pascal a little bit, but I think some of that is just kind of marketing and a little bit of trash talk. I also think a big part of it was Sergey just learning a little bit from that first fight. You guys, he's still learning on the job here. He did have, somewhat of an amateur background and everything, but as a professional, he seems to be learning more about boxing with each fight. And that's why I think John David Jackson has done an outstanding job with Sergey. And if the fight between Kovalev and Ward happens later this year, HBO is saying it's supposed to happen in November. If it does, and if Sergey wins that fight, John David Jackson's probably gonna get my vote for Trainer of the Year. To see Sergey grow from just a straight up brawler, which is what we saw early on with some of his HBO fights, to a guy who can box with real craft, which is what we've started to see more and more. That's really, really impressive. So, for Kovalev, quick punch numbers, not that, it really matters, but Sergey landed 165 of 412 total punches, landed 40% of his total punches. That's just good stuff, man. That's good stuff. And Pascal, he isn't always a guy who's easy to land accurately with. You can land shots on Pascal, but if you look at some of the guys he's fought over the years, their accuracy wasn't very good against him. He's hard to look good against. I think that first fight with Sergey just took a lot out of him. He took an ass whooping. He took another one in this fight. Pascal landed 30 out of 108 punches for 28%. His output was very, very low because he was getting his ass handed to him. After the fight, Adonis Stevenson with his crew of buddies or whatever jumped up in the crowd, in the ring, and tried to get up in Sergey's face and try to basically do what Tyson Fury did to Deontay Wilder. Here's the difference. Tyson Fury flew to another country that he's not from. He flew to Deontay Wilder's country here in America, got up in the ring by himself, and got all up in Deontay Wilder's face. I'm talking right here, by himself, and talked some shit. None of it was ignorant or racial or calling people names. It was WWE, you know, it was that kind of a stunt, no doubt. But Tyson showed brass balls by flying across the ocean, going into Deontay Wilder's territory, his home country, going up in the ring by himself and challenging him. And again, Deontay Wilder, to his credit, he got right back in Tyson Fury's face, which was great. Those two guys are not afraid of each other. This was a little different. Adonis Stevenson was in his backyard with his home crowd behind him, right? He's a Montreal guy. In the ring with Jean Pascal, who's a friend of his. Backed up by a crew of, I don't know if he's paying these dudes or what, these guys wearing these funny hats, and gets up, tries to get up in Sergey's face. Didn't get close though. You notice, he only got within about arm's length before his boys held him back, right? And he tried to talk some shit. What I love about Sergey is Sergey just flicked him off. Sergey didn't yell back at him, he just flicked him off. And I thought that was kind of the way to handle it. Look, Adonis Stevenson wants absolutely no part of Sergey Kovalev. And if you didn't believe that before, and a lot of you out there have challenged me on Twitter and stuff like that, Rob Palmer, some of you guys out there have got on me for saying that I'm taking Kovalev's side too much on this issue. Just look at what happened in the ring last Saturday. Look at the acting job by Adonis Stevenson. Compare the move he tried to pull to what Tyson Fury pulled. Hell, to what Shannon Briggs tried to pull with Vladimir Klitschko. Shannon Briggs had way more balls, as crazy as he was, than Adonis Stevenson. Shannon Briggs actually wanted to fight with Vlad. Adonis Stevenson doesn't. That fight's not going to happen. So let's just get it out of our minds. Adonis Stevenson is a non-factor. He beat one top light heavyweight, and that was Chad Dawson, who had been knocked down and knocked out in sparring, preparing for that fight, who killed himself to get down to super middleweight to fight Andre Ward and got his ass whooped, has never been the same after that. It was a total cash out for him. Adonis Stevenson, right place, right time, got lucky, got the lineal title, but this is a situation where the lineal title means shit. Sergey Kovalev is not only the real light heavyweight champion, he's one of the top 5 pound for pound best fighters in the world. And all of you out there who are just hating on this dude for his so-called racist antics, for his so-called mean streak, you're the same guys who love when Bernard Hopkins says racially charged things. You're the same guys who admire Muhammad Ali for the way he would beat down fighters who disrespected him and prolong the beating, right? Remember the What's My Name fight? Sonny Liston, I can go back. I can go way back. I can keep it recent with some of these fighters. You're being very, very biased and selective in your outrage. You're being very typical. Also, last Saturday in Shanghai, China, undefeated Japanese middleweight Ryota Murata scores a second round knockout to improve to 9-0 with 6 knockouts, and the Chinese superstar Shiming scores an 8th round TKO, gets the rare stoppage, improves to 7-1 with 2 KOs and wins a regional title. You figure Shiming is going to be in the hunt, set up for a world title shot probably before the end of the year. It wouldn't surprise me. In London, George Groves got back into the win column, scoring a 5th round TKO. He fought at 170-pound catchweight, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. I know some of you guys over there in the UK love George Groves, and look, he seems to be a really good guy. He seems to really give it his all every time, but he just comes up short against the elite. He still lost 3 of his last 6. He only had 1 fight in 2015. I just don't think this guy is ever going to be a titleist. Not much going on this week, but Friday, the 5th in Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio, California, just a couple hours outside of Los Angeles. Another card from Golden Boy Promotions with two guys who had very lackluster 2015s, very, very inactive, lackluster 2015s, trying to get their 2016s off to a good start. Frankie Gomez, who is 19-0, 13 knockouts, only had one fight last year, and that was at 150 pounds in October. And this is a guy who fights as a junior welterweight. He's got a fight scheduled in the main event. And in the co-feature, Randy Caballero, who's 22-0 with 13 knockouts. This guy had no fights last year. He was slated to fight on a Cotto Canelo undercard. This was a huge opportunity for him. Probably obviously the biggest stage of his career, the biggest opportunity of his career, and he missed weight. He missed weight by over 5 pounds, I believe. He's a bantamweight, so 5 pounds, that's big, right? 5 pounds ain't nothing for a heavyweight. This guy's a bantamweight, and he was over 5 pounds overweight. He lost his IBF bantamweight title on the scale to Englishman Lee Haskins, who took the belt with him home without having to shed any blood or sweat or anything in the ring. So both of these guys have a lot of potential, and they had a lot of fans buzzing at the beginning of the year, 2015. Very disappointing years. There were injuries, there were layoffs, there were weight issues. Hopefully they can get things back on track, because these were two of Golden Boy's more promising prospects. If they could get some nice wins here, get this year started on the right foot, then hey, all's forgiven last year. Other than that, though, not much going on. As I said before, man, the schedule is just looking really, really bad. February is looking bleak. There's a couple of PBC on Fox Sports 1 cards, but they're not even worth talking about. The matchups just aren't there. And speaking of PBC and what they've got going on, and then Showtime, I just look at what's scheduled even on Showtime. I'm just looking at their schedule right here on my laptop. They had Wilder Spielka last month in January. Then, of course, they got the Santa Cruz Kiko Martinez fight, which is a mismatch in my opinion, because Martinez is done. Nothing else scheduled, man. Nothing else scheduled. At least over at HBO, I'm not crazy excited about those fights, but we're gonna get to see guys that we want to see. We're gonna get to see Gennady Golovkin. We're gonna get to see Luis Ortiz. So not the greatest matchups for them, but at least we get to see the fighters we want to see, and they're staying busy.